Okay, good evening. Welcome to the kickoff of our spring formation series, which is called Arrows Tales. We have a great opportunity over the next few months to hear inspiring stories of men on this team and how they've encountered God. Before we dive more into what Arrows Tales is, though, I'd like to introduce a man who needs no introduction to this team. Amongst his many accolades, he is Arrow number 26. He is one of the founding members of Arrows Rugby, a past club vice president, current club president, 2017-18 St. Sebastian Man of the Year, second to none in karaoke.
That's true.
That's true.
That part's
I've witnessed that. And I don't know that he lists us anywhere on Facebook, LinkedIn, but I'm sure he's a stand-in for Matt Damon in some films. So, but start with you for some basic life facts. So tell me about your immediate and extended family.
Yeah.
And you might hear some giggles for slides going on in the background. So.
Yeah. You could tell I was ready for video pretty early. My mom and dad, my parents divorced when I was really young, so I was the only child for quite a while, and now my mom's remarried, my dad's remarried, and my dad, on my dad's side, I have 7 more now, brothers and sisters. They started having more kids and growing their family when I was 15. So now I have 7 more brothers and sisters, which is a lot of fun.
Yes, and I know that'll be a topic we get to dive into today. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
Here in Houston, a little bit by the Astrodome, a little bit Spring Branch. Went to St. Vincent de Paul for 10 years, St. Thomas for 4 years, A&M for 4. Back to Houston.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
And what do you do now for a living?
I'm a recruiter. So recruiter for civil engineers and land surveyors. Also helping do some other consulting work with other firms that are trying to start up recruiting
Very good.
operations.
It'd be cooler if it was for process engineers, but I forgive you for that.
Yeah, so. I did used to.
Nice.
However.
Nice. Okay, so some rapid fire fun facts. Favorite beer?
I love anything. Well, not anything. Favorite beer, Trappist Rockfort number 10 from a Belgium Trappist
I was going to say
monastery.
Brett's probably one of the few who actually knows what that is, but that's good.
That is my favorite beer.
Okay, favorite saint?
Saint Augustine.
Favorite Arrows memory?
Memory, okay. It's a lot of good ones.
Muma's walk-off against Galveston, I don't know.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
That was a really good one. But,
that was a lot of fun. It was particularly fun because right before we scrummed down, Arthur came in and it was like, okay, full-time, last play. And Arthur, who's probably the most emotional guy on the team, was like, got in my face and was like, score! And I was like, okay.
Is he not Gimli? Yeah, Arthur.
All I did was move the ball, and guys did the rest back there. So that was pretty awesome.
Very good.
For those that weren't there, we were down by 2. Muma scored under the post. We won by 5.
As time expired. Dream car.
Dream car. When I was younger, I wanted a black Escalade. Nice. Now I have a black Explorer.
Close. Favorite karaoke song to sing?
This Is How We Do It by Montel Jordan.
Okay. Your favorite GIF?
Ooh. There was one of a wrestler, and he had like really long hair, like blonde hair, and it was just like him, and he was breathing really hard, like he just got, and he was just like, I don't know.
We'll go with that one.
Yeah, sure.
I like it. And dream pilgrimage, where would you like to go?
I've not gone to Rome, and I'm not, in the way, I think the El Camino would be really cool, but I mean, I got to go to Rome at some point.
Absolutely. And this is your final quiz. Who is Arrow number 43? He's surprisingly good at these. We'll see if he gets it.
Is it Michael Hart?
No.
43.
He no longer plays. I'll give you that clue. He might host a podcast that you've been on.
Eric Robinson.
There you go. There you go. Very good.
Very nice.
You'll get a chance for some more arrow number guessing. So
Okay.
awesome. So hey, back to the Arrow's Tales as we kick it off. Christianity, and in particular the Catholic faith, is first and foremost a relationship with a person, and that person is Jesus Christ. So this spring, I'm really, really excited to have the opportunity to go through, again, stories of guys on this team who have met Christ in their life's journey. We want to hear real stories of real people and their real experiences with them. So that's what we're here for tonight. Our Holy Fathers have emphasized this relationship over the last several decades. So St. John Paul II said that it is necessary to awaken again in believers a full relationship with Christ, mankind's only Savior. His successor, Pope Benedict XVI, said that the Christian faith is not only a matter of believing that certain things are true, but above all, a personal relationship with Jesus. And our most recent Holy Father, our current Holy Father, Pope Francis, says that being a Christian means having a living relationship with the person of Jesus. And so with that, we want to walk through your life and your relationship with Jesus. So take me back to the beginning,
Sure.
your birth and your coming to meet God in early life.
Sure. So you're asking me to just for reference to kind of outline some maybe stages of my life, and and just kind of think about the relationship that I have with Jesus and with Christ and with God along the way. So I'd say I probably have like kind of three major stages of life. Number one would start at birth. And I guess my relationship along the way here with Jesus would be kind of meeting him, getting to know him, and just kind of getting an understanding more with my brain, kind of just knowing the facts about who he is. And so in terms of the story, so I mentioned it earlier, but so my parents divorced when I was young. My mom remarried, and then she divorced again. And I never fully understood what led to it, but I remember most of the time I was just kind of, as probably most people are in the situation, just a little bit. I was very young, so I was like 2 or 3, but I was confused, and I wasn't really sure why I couldn't have mom and dad together, at the same time. So that was tough, and for a while I was hoping, I was really hoping that they would get back together. And so this probably, a lot of that and going back and forth between houses, and they did a really good job of kind of spending equal time with me. So they were working, the schedules out to do that, which was nice because I was with, I was spending time with both of them. And it made me, I guess that whole experience made me pretty adamant that I wasn't gonna like settle down into a marriage that I wasn't ready for, because my thoughts were, well, if you weren't ready for it and it was going to happen, well then, maybe it ends in divorce, and I didn't want that to happen. So, and I didn't really have that. The only thing was I didn't really have that image of what kind of successful marriage might look like.
Yep. So
I didn't really have anything to work from in my direct experience anyway. So anyway, along the way, I'm like I said earlier, I went to 14 years of Catholic school. I went to St. Vincent de Paul and St. Thomas. I received my first communion, which I think is in there somewhere. Reconciliation and confirmation there. One of the big thing about our sacraments, obviously, is that we receive graces, but it's important that we cooperate with those graces, with his graces, to be able to to achieve, to live and to grow in that relationship. So my, cooperation would be waning kind of towards the end of this first phase, which lasts till about 16 years old. So I started playing rugby at 14 years old. Neither my mom or dad had played rugby or been exposed to rugby. My uncle actually got me into it, so that sounded pretty good. Like no one really knew. I didn't really have any influence from it, so it was like, maybe it was something else I could do that was new. So, and then my mom and dad, my mom remarried, divorced, and then remarried again when I was 16. My dad just before that when I was 15. And my dad began to grow a new family. And I always wanted my mom and dad to be happy, because growing up I was like, I could see that they were like, sad and that they were not together. But I always wanted them to be happy, and I wanted them to each, remarry too, if that didn't mean that they were going to get back together. But I was an only child for 15 years, and I guess that played a part in me not really understanding the practical implications of if one of them got remarried and started growing a family. So my dad started growing a family when I was 15 years old, and I rebelled. I didn't expect to, but I rebelled against it, and I turned away from my dad. And, I had newer brothers and sisters that were coming along, and I didn't lean in to that situation. I turned away. And I very much regret that. But I mean, working on anyway, it would come in later, but, working on really building those relationships now too. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, so just looking back, and thank you for kind of setting the organization of the life. Folks in the room will see it on the slides behind us. Your pictures are kind of prefaced with the phase of life that we're talking about. So as they cycle through, we have phase 1, which is your birth up to kind of this point of maybe rebellion, rejection, and then it's that phase of 16-ish on to your mid-20s, right?
Yeah.
And what your relationship was like then, and then mid-20s to now. So back to this first phase, though, one thing that's always intrigued me about you, and probably not something I've shared a lot about with you personally, but we have some very similar family stories of divorce at a young age, and how that really comes back to really impact you. So one thing that I've learned in my own relationship with Christ and my healing journey, and there's a lot of psychology research that talks about this, and that's that our view of our Heavenly Father has a lot to do with our view of our earthly father. And particularly that view and relationship is kind of well solidified by the age of 12 or so. So that's within this first phase of your life. So how would you describe your view of your earthly father then, and maybe do you think that had an impact on your relationship with God?
Sure, yeah. Well, I know that, I remember both of us, times when we would both sit on the couch and both be really sad about my mom and dad not being together. And so I remember that, and I know that, he was hurting for a while. I know that, he was always really, so he was in the Corps Cadets too. So and his dad was, Greatest Generation type stuff. So he was in the South Pacific in World War II. So his dad was a heavy disciplinarian as well. And so language of discipline was very loud. And so, that was part of growing up too, is just understanding that it's important to be disciplined and to work hard and all those sorts of things. And so that was always something that I understood. And then it's interesting, so you say 12 years old, like up to 12 years old, that's a pretty important stage there. So up to, around I guess when I was like 10 or 11 or so, I started to remember that he started to really dig into his faith and really like turn back to God. And he'd tell me later that he started to, he realized that like his way wasn't working, which he'll say now. And then, it's funny because you're in that situation and you don't know how to fully communicate what's going on. Maybe you don't fully understand it, which is just happening in the next stage of my life quite a bit. But so I noticed that he was moving in that direction, and then, he basically gave everything back to God, got remarried. But by that time, I was already kind of rebelling against some of this stuff. I don't know. It's hard to explain, I guess. But in that way, it was like, okay, so you're telling me these things. I know who God is. I know who Jesus is. Like, it's that guy over there, right? But it's not like my friend, right? It's not like the person I have a relationship with. It's like, that's him over there. Yeah. So.
Well, and I think it's just interesting because you kind of concluded your bit earlier talking about, you're coming to this age of 16 or so where you're coming to a head with your dad, and he's starting a new family, and you're starting to reject that. And it's also going to coincide a bit with a rejection of faith.
100%.
A rejection of Christ. Yeah. So the importance of those earthly relationships we have and how those really point to our heavenly relationships too.
Yep.
And what was your, just to close this phase two, what was your family like spiritually at this time? So you're between two houses, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Did your parents go to Mass? Did they talk much about faith in the home?
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit of a picture of that.
Yeah, we went to Mass every week. Mm-hmm. Went to Mass every Sunday. Wrote prayers before meals.
Mm-hmm.
Bless the Lord and these, I guess, and that. But not a whole lot of praying at home before bed or whatever. It was very much like the if you look at sometimes it's like Catholics pray the same prayers or whatever it is, and then it's like silly Catholics. Like, where's your relationship with it?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, so it was basically like that.
Yep, definitely. Very good.
Yeah.
All right, let's roll into the next phase.
Okay. So, so this second kind of stage of life here for me was started at 16 years old, lasted till I was about 26. So it was about a decade where I was kind of checked out and. Well, I'll just tell you about it. So we, this would be the stage that I would say that I was basically, I would reject the friendship of Jesus, of Christ. So I was speaking. At the time I was getting pretty good at rugby, and and that was kind of becoming my barometer of how life was going. So like make a select team here, make a trip overseas here, and get selected for that team and whatever. And so those sorts of things were like, right, okay, life's going pretty good. I'm doing some good things. And so my friends were also really important to me too, because I didn't have any siblings until I had siblings that I was not choosing to really get to know. And so I would dig in with my rugby buddies and my core buddies at A&M, and then other buddies from high school and whatever it might be. I started drinking a lot more frequently in high school. So towards this latter half of high school, so drinking more frequently there. Really took off in college. Through college, the drinking really escalated. I was in the Corps. I was playing rugby. School was a distant third for me. I don't even know how I graduated, honestly. But it was a distant third, and more of it was like a big. What's the challenge of fitting it all in this box and making it happen? But my relationship, and it was to the point in drinking where nights out always escalated, and every night out had for me felt like I really had to top the last night out that I had. My I guess you could say my appetite for a good time was unquenchable, and typically that was all fueled by alcohol, and. So that was kind of a big part of that. And that's really from, it kind of escalated all the way through, and it just continued to go up. Luckily in college I had a couple of really good groups of friends that were in the Corps and in rugby. You could be in some pretty interesting rugby environments. The Aggie rugby environment was pretty solid with some pretty good guys. And I was fortunate for that, because I could have gone way further off the rails, although I would in my 20s anyway. But Anyway, so along with that, around 16, I started dating more, and most of the time I was kind of justifying, inappropriately for sure. I would justify it by telling myself I got to make sure I meet the right girl because I'm not getting divorced and all that stuff, and so. With the drinking habits too, I would always want more physically, but not spiritually. And I didn't know that about myself. I would say that I was trying to find my soulmate or the one or whatever, and I believed that. But looking back on it, it's not true, because I was lying to them. I was lying to myself. I hurt a lot of people, and I was doing a ton of damage to my soul, and dragging a lot of women down with me, and a lot of friends down with me too, and so it was pretty it was pretty interesting. Plus I was terrified of divorce, so it was just well, this isn't working out, so I'm just not feeling it, move on, and then someone's crying, and and it was just kind of an over and over sort of thing. So I was a pretty loose cannon. I no one could really predict my behavior. You could probably, even some of my oldest friends would probably say, like Matt Habermite's an example. He's not here, is he? But he could probably tell you too, like, I was pretty unpredictable in those days, and I couldn't predict what I was going to do myself. And just in those situations. So, and I didn't, really it's because I didn't have a true understanding of my identity of being a son of God, and that he would really help me with being able to make some of these decisions and like work through issues that I was having internally. And I didn't have that relationship. I wasn't going to mass. I wasn't praying. I was completely away from all of that. I was rejecting the grace that was available there. I was rejecting the relationship altogether. I maybe went to like 3 or 4 masses freshman year. I had some good buddies that would always plant seeds, because every Sunday morning I'd be hungover in bed, and they'd be like, "Hey man, let's go to mass," and I'd be like, "Nope," and so those are still like very good friends to this day.
Yeah,
those particular, and you remember that stuff.
Yep.
And so anyway, one of the things that I was hoping to share too, just along these lines, is like along the lines of I didn't quite understand what was going on, and so I just, if I could, I wanted to pull something out of. So this is St. Augustine, the Confessions, and he talks about. So what he's talking about here is he's wondering and he's confused about why he likes to do bad, basically, and he's telling this story about when he was younger, and him and a bunch of buddies go and they want to go steal some pears, just some pears. And so here he says, "We carried off an immense load of pears, not to eat, for we barely tasted them before throwing them to the hogs. Our only pleasure in doing it was that it was forbidden. Such was my heart, O God, such was my heart. Yet in the depth of the abyss you had pity on it. Let that heart now tell you what it sought when I was thus evil for no object, having no cause for wrongdoing save my wrongness. The malice of the act was base, and I loved it. That is to say, I loved my own undoing. I loved the evil in me, not the thing for which I did the evil, simply the evil. My soul was depraved and hurled itself down from the security in you into utter destruction, seeking no profit from wickedness, but only to be wicked." So he talks in there about grasping, and one of the interesting parts that now I understand, but is really outlined in St. John Paul II's Theology of the Body, and Christopher West has some great commentary on St. John Paul II stuff too. But it's that concept of grasping for that which is not. And so he talks about grasping for pears. Well, I mean, Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were grasping for the forbidden fruit. That forbidden fruit's exactly what he's talking about. And it's one of those things where, the whole deal is, if you're grasping disorderly, I guess that's the right way to put it, right? If you're grasping disorderly for something, it's not going to be the same gift. And I couldn't really understand it till later, but like it's something where you have to receive. You have to receive by grace. And at those times, I was in rare form. I was grasping at everything, and so I couldn't understand that, and nobody was effectively. Now, a lot of people were telling me stuff, especially my dad, because he was telling me how it is pretty frequently, but nobody was effectively like shaking me from my spiral.
Yeah.
And until I met Sara.
Yeah.
Which is stage 3.
Stage 3. Nice. So let's sit on this stage for a little bit. When you were reading that bit from St. Augustine, it really made me think of St. Paul too recently, and that is I do not do the good I want to do, right?
100%.
But I do the evil that I do not wish to do. And that's the inclination of sin in us. It goes back to our concupiscence and our original sin.
Right.
And it is so true in our lives, and so challenging to overcome. So it's so beautiful to kind of recognize the need for grace in those situations, those moments. The other thing I'll slip in is a bit of my personal story that really lines up here too. I sat in counseling with my who is now wife back very early in our relationship, because I had been very much hurting her by grasping at things. And the advice the counselor gave to me at that time, which I still remember today, is that same open hand analogy. We are called to open our hands to receive God's grace. The moment we try to close it, it's gone, or we've squeezed it, we've distorted it. It's not the same.
Yeah.
And our Lord puts things in our hands and then He takes them away, all according to kind of His providence and divinity. But just thought that was a very interesting parallel there. Can definitely relate to the grasping.
Yeah.
What's beautiful, though, is if we zoom ahead past this third stage of your life that you're going to walk us through next, you have a whole different appreciation for things. You have a whole different view of kind of a relationship with Christ. So knowing what you know now, where do you see Jesus with you in that time of your life? There's good in you. There was good present. Where do you think that was?
Well, I mean, I was, I was in terms of the organizations I was a part of, I was working pretty hard. I was learning from a lot of guys that I was around that were just showing me what hard work and fraternity and camaraderie was. So, and that's always one of the greatest, cool things about rugby is having that camaraderie, because you all have got, solid, common goal, different body types, right? Everybody says there's a different position for you in rugby, or there's a position for every body type and whatever it is. So, anyway, so the rugby itself was really helpful, and I know that he was there, and he was like, okay, well, this can be your thing, but I'm going to use it for something else later, and so that was really interesting, coming to realization later, and but sometimes it was like my buddies, Jimmy and Jack, in college that would, it's always like planted seeds, right? So it's like open the door hungover on a Sunday and they're like, hey, we're going to mass, you want to go? And I'm like, nah, man. And so, but that is like an example of someone like poking their head in, like testing the water, and I'm like, rejected. Mm-hmm. And like, continuing the trend.
Christ waiting at the door, right?
Quite literally.
Yeah.
So, and that was in a lot of people. And in my dad too. He was frequent. It was pretty funny because we would get together when I was back in town from college or in my early 20s or whatever, and he would frequently ask this question that was so annoying to me, and it would be Blake, how's your walk with your faith going? And I'd be like, what? Like, what are you talking about, man? Yeah, I was lost.
I'd be caught off guard by that.
I was lost. Yeah, but he would, but he'd always ask, and I didn't have to say anything. Yeah, because he knew. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and maybe you can help me out here. I'm kind of painting a picture of your dad a little bit in my head. When you were young, obviously the divorce and challenges, some sorrow in his life, maybe a little bit of reconversion for him in your early teens and as you approach that. But how about this super free love he seems to have offered you in this time? Someone who's really just come around to a new family and a new relationship with God himself. He's not he's joking or asking you about your walk in faith, but he's probably not banging on your door, picking you up, making you go to church, something like that. Right. So that balance between a genuine interest in you as his son, but respecting the free will that you have, right, to receive or not to receive.
Very much so. Free will is a huge deal, and you're right, because he could really get in my business, but he respected that for sure. Yeah, and that's obviously what our Heavenly Father does.
Correct, and it seems like that paid off a lot. So, yeah. Awesome. All right, let's hit age 26 and meeting of a fine young woman.
So Sara was around 26 years old, and Sara and I knew each other since we were 15. So it was really, really good that we didn't date until I was 26.
The Lord shielded you, shielded her from you for a little bit.
Providence puts a wedge between you until it's time. Yeah. So, and this would be kind of my, from 26 to now, I'm 32 now, so it's only been a few years, but I would say it's kind of my, I'm returning. I read that book by Henry Nouwen, The Prodigal Son, with Rembrandt's painting of the prodigal son. It's like, oh my God, that's like, how much I can very much relate to this guy, and that's like, to this day, obviously, it's still that's still me for sure. But Sara was the first one. I was just thinking of it. It's funny because just trying to think about how to formulate what I'm trying to say about this, and I'm realizing that she's the first one, the first person that spoke to me with the right combination of truth, and charity or love, because she challenged me where I was wrong for sure. Like, I mean, you know, I'm on Instagram and following girls I shouldn't be following and like liking stuff and whatever. And it's like, hey, dude, not cool, bro, because this is how it makes me feel. And that's not cool at all. So she would check me in those situations, but she would forgive. She would forgive those offenses, but she would have to make sure, like, this is why it's hurtful and harmful. And I didn't, you know, and so she was very patient with me in coming along, but she did speak the truth to me. On the other side, she showed me her flaws, and she owned them and would sincerely apologize. And that was something that was a little bit more distant for me too, that I hadn't seen too much of before. But to show, like, her, I mean, she laid everything on the table too. And we had both had problems where basically, I mean, we weren't showing people our whole selves. And she was showing me everything. And so that was it was a really big deal. And so we started to, I mean, it was kind of one of those things that kind of stunned me, and I think it kind of shocked her too. But having similar backgrounds kind of sped us up in the process, because, you know, she went to 14 years Catholic school too. So did I. Both went to A&M, but we never dated until that moment. And so we started. She asked if we, you know, wanted to go to Mass together, and I was like, yeah, it's probably a good idea, because I always knew, like, you know, I was going to get back to it, but I didn't have a timeline. I didn't have any urgency. So anyway, we started going back to Mass together and just working on things. And 6 months later, I was like, okay, I gotta do this. I gotta marry this girl, because there's no one that approached me with that kind of combination of, again, it's the truth and the charity, the truth with charity or love, because she wanted the best for me. And that was pretty amazing, because, I mean, basically that is the image of Jesus, and that is the love that he shows. It's, hey, I'm going to be truthful with you, and I'm going to tell you where you're wrong, but that this is for your better, because I love you, and not meaning like I love you and you can do whatever you want, but I love you because I want you to spend eternity with me at the end of this life that you have here on earth. And so anyway, I couldn't formulate any of that during this time. I was just like, this looks and feels right. And so that was, you know, my major theological depth. But so we,
pretty profound.
So we started going to marriage prep at St. Rose. It was one of the things that, so we got married at St. Rose of Lima, and, you know, starting to do wedding planning. It's like start checking boxes off, right? So we did marriage prep at St. Rose. And it was over the course of 8 weeks. There's different ways you could do it in the Archdiocese, Galveston, Houston. You could either like do it with your priest and he chooses what you do, or you go to the weekend retreat. And we did the 8 weeks separate, like 2 nights or 2 hours a night, which I'm really glad we did, because we had a lot to unpack. And it was a very good thing that we had time in between there, because we were working on a lot together. Both of us really wanted to make sure that, you know, we were really doing the right things, and that we brought God into our relationship. So we started to do that. I started to understand, you know, what this whole grasping thing was. I was a regular user of pornography and masturbating all the time, and that was a problem. And understanding what that was, well, first of all, it came up because, you know, part of the marriage prep, it's like, hey, guess what? If this is an issue, perhaps you should talk about it. And we're like sitting next to each other, and I'm like, shit. And I was like, this is gonna be real weird.
Oh man.
And so obviously it came up later, and it's funny because a lot of, you know, it has become so normal, and it's really messed up. And so I was shocked actually by her reaction, and I was like, what? And she was very upset. I mean, it was like, okay, the words, I'm trying to, like, the reaction she had, it was a combination of hurt, disappointed, knowing I was better than that, furious, shocked, objectified, disgusted, and it was all pointed towards me being better than using images just to get off. And so that was a really interesting point. that was like right in the middle of our marriage prep. I mean, to the point where it was like, are we even going forward with the rest of this? I was also dipping at the time, and I had been for however many years, but not that that's inherently bad, but I was hiding it from her. And so it was, I was dipping like 3 to 5 times a day. So it was a regular part of my deal, and I was hiding bottles all over the place. And she was like, a lot of times it was like, in plain sight, but, wouldn't draw attention to it. So it was like, okay. But like she never knew. And so I remember going home and after the big old porn talk, and then I went home and I was like in the depths, like what's gonna happen here? Yeah. And Jesus was there, and it was very easy because he was just like, you know what to do. And I was like, well, yeah. And so anyway, so with that, because I had been keeping dipping such a secret, which is silly, I just didn't want to bring it all out. I just didn't want to. And but I knew that at some point I wanted to stop dipping. So so that, went home, thought about that, and then I came back and met her to go pick her up before we were going to our next marriage prep class. And I brought in the first can of dip that she had ever seen that I had, which was also the last can of dip that I ever bought. And I put it down, and I was like, this is the last thing that you don't know about me. And there. And so that was a huge moment for us. I mean, we were still having to work through all kinds of stuff through the whole thing. And so at that point, with the in terms of grasping, and we were also, we were not chaste in our relationship up to that point. We were physical, and we recommitted to our chastity together for the rest of our engagement as well. So there's 6 months left. So we recommitted to not having sex anymore, and not having any kind of sexual activity. Which was a huge gift for us, and so obviously on our wedding night it was like that. It was like this. Yeah, it was like, it was
hands open.
So it was it was like that gift was regiven.
Yeah, praise God.
Praise God indeed. So it was nice, and also in the course of the marriage prep, we had a chance to go back to like one of the talks of the night one of the nights is about reconciliation and forgiveness, and then there's the sacrament of reconciliation afterwards. And I hadn't been in a confessional in 10 years, and so we had that, and I went in and dropped off about 10 years of guilt, and came back into the like officially back in communion with the church for the first time in a decade. And again, there Jesus was right there in the confessional, just ready to take it off me. All I had to do was tell him. Yeah. So anyway, so that was awesome. After the wedding, the marriage prep team asked if we wanted to get back involved with the team itself to help prepare other couples for marriage. I guess they saw how messed up we were, and how we could, and how you could kind of turn things around. So we got back involved, and so that's like free therapy for us. Like we get to go in and give talks, and in order to give those talks, we have to prepare for them. And in order to prepare for them, we have to work through our own issues to actually, and that's a huge positive thing for us too, which is really good. So then, less than 2 years into marriage, I was talking to a client, and he connected me with a guy that was starting a Catholic rugby team. And I was like, like, a Catholic rugby team? What are you talking about? That didn't work. Like, that doesn't sound right. And but I was interested because obviously, Catholic community, played a lot of rugby. I was here in Houston. He was from Dallas. So that sounds like something that could be a pretty good idea. So I met up with Mike Shad, and he already had everything set up. So he had like the corporation set up. He had the logo, he had everything set up. All I had to do was like show up, and I was like, wow, this guy's actually doing some stuff, and he's not asking me, he's telling me what he's about to do. So I was like, it's pretty impressive. So I went home and told Sara about it, just to say like, this sounds pretty cool. I'll probably connect him with my Uncle Larry and see if that's helpful. Maybe call the guys at St. Thomas and see if it's helpful for field space or whatever. And Sarah was like, that does sound pretty cool, and maybe you should, you could go out to training a little bit and maybe play in a few games. And she never asked me to stop playing rugby. I stopped playing rugby on my own, and I was just like, skirt, like, I didn't even think about that actually. And so here we are 4 years later doing this,
yes,
which is interesting. And then it really, so my conversion, I would say, of my reconversion of heart and going back to the relationship with Jesus was then so furthered by meeting guys like you and Eric and all the guys that are here on this team that really opened my eyes to the actual intellectual tradition of the church, of Christianity itself. You're the one that turned me on to Bishop Pellerin, who produced this thing. Not wrote it, produced the whatever. So, but Bishop Pellerin, started listening to him and Matt Fradd and some of these other guys, which really opened up like Pandora's box for me in terms of listening to other people. I remember sitting with Freddie at breakfast, and then I'll be done in this stage in a second. But I remember sitting with Freddie at breakfast once, and I was like, it's interesting. I mean, the church has got such a rich history and everything. I just wish it was easier to reconcile with like reason. And he was like, what? He was like, dude, you went to St. Thomas Aquinas High School. Like, how the heck do you not know how it reconciles with reason? Yeah. And I was like, oh, what? And so he started opening, my eyes to those sorts of things, which gets me reading, guys like St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. Well, commentaries of Aquinas, because Jesus, so deep. Yeah. But anyway, so then it turned me on to all that and studying my faith more too, which is what I'm trying to do every day now.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. That's a beautiful journey. I want to go back to intimacy a little bit. So,
okay,
you would have come out of your teenage, young 20s years not really understanding what an intimate relationship looks like.
Yeah.
And you would have now encountered Sara, whom you developed an intimate relationship with, obviously, and now married to as your bride. So, I mean, how did encountering Sara and intimacy with her help you with your intimacy with God?
Ooh, yeah. So, there's a lot that goes into, so I guess I liken it a little bit to prayer, and it is prayer. I mean, that sort of intimacy is a form of prayer. But I would say that a lot of times with Sara, that intimacy that we're forming, it was stuff that receiving those gifts is kind of similar to praying too, because I guess I wasn't big on praying, and I mean, only the last few years have I really started to develop any kind of prayer life. But you always think that you're gonna, I don't know if I'm really making a great correlation here, but I guess I would say that the more I commit to it and commit to what his plan is, and truly like give him glory and praise him for what he's done here, the more I realize the gifts that are all around me and the gifts that I do receive on a regular basis. Whereas if I ignore him and go for my own selfish wants, anything that's created, then it doesn't work out so well. Yeah. And it's similar with Sara. If I want to take advantage of her and grasp for things out of selfish gratification, it's not beautiful.
And it's not intimate.
It's distorted. Yeah, and it's not intimate. That's right. So it's so much more beautiful when you do have that mode of caring for them and receiving that gift, rather than, again, going back to grasping. So I think
that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think the freely given, freely receive, it's something that it sounds like you learn very tangibly in your relationship with your wife, and therefore that really helped open up that kind of a relationship with Christ and with God.
Yeah.
Which is great, because again, Christ wants to be present with us in our daily lives through real people, right?
Right.
And so I think that's the beauty of the way he manifests himself in our lives through other people. So let's go back to the porn bomb.
All right, let's do it.
So, hey, I bet there's people throughout the world, people in this room who would be terrified to tell someone that they're addicted to porn or that they masturbate regularly or anything along those lines. And you also mentioned how good Sara was at truth and charity with you. Mm-hmm. So what kind of was what was the truth and charity that she shared with you in that particular arena?
Well, the initial reaction was complete devastation, right? I mean, I just crushed this person.
Yep.
And so initially it was pretty rough. I mean, actually, I think right when it happened, we were supposed to go to her parents' house for a family dinner. And she, I think she said something along the lines of, "I just want to be around people that love me." And I was like, "Oh God." So that was totally accurate. I mean, and totally valid for her to share. But after that, especially, I don't know what it was, but I mean, just giving her the dip can and being like, on top of this, surprise, and there's also this, and that is it. Yeah. And you have my whole being, and my appetite for anything sexually is all with you, and only with you for the rest of our lives. And she was, she got through her pain, but that wouldn't happen if I wouldn't give her everything.
Yeah.
So she got through the pain and pretty quickly recovered. I mean, we went to marriage prep the next night, and we're working on trying to get married.
Yeah.
So
it's beautiful.
And but the whole thing is if God wasn't in a relationship, if we weren't preparing to get married in the church, that would have been it.
Yeah.
I think it would have just blown it all up. And
or it might not have come out then.
Right, and I would have been still in stage 2, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful. I think what's beautiful about this is if you think of the common man, and you're talking about tobacco, you're talking about pornography, you're talking about sexual intimacy, all three of those things going on, right? And all of them stopped. All of them stopped at just sharing truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's amazing, because think of us trying to do that on our own. Think of us trying to stop just one of those addictions on our own.
Tried. Both of them actually. I tried a lot.
Yeah.
And just over and and there was just no urgency, and it was like, well, I'll do it when I do it. Yeah. And it was like, oh, yeah, now's the time.
Yeah. It's just the beauty of where our sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. So.
Yeah.
So I think you have a little prepared bit for what advice would you give to others who might be trying to start a relationship with Christ, who might not even know where to go next.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So I think that a couple of things that I just wanted to write down that I thought were kind of cool. I mean, I kind of wanted to start with a couple of challenging questions, and the one, because these I feel like are some that lead to some pretty interesting thoughts and kind of where you go from here. So, and this, I guess, a philosopher's question here, but why is there that we have something rather than nothing at all? And that's a deep question, obviously, because it's like, right, why is this all here? Why do we even have a universe, potentially multiverse, whatever's going on, but why at all? Why not nothing? And obviously we wouldn't be present. There would be no existence of any of us. But does the answer to that question affect whether or not our existence matters? And how is kind of the way that, and I don't have answers, but
to ponder that.
Yeah. And then the other kind of question is it's like a real simple one that I think we've all been, all humans have probably asked, because we are self-aware and all that stuff, but what happens when you die? And should the answer to that affect how you live? Mm-hmm. So anyway, those are just a couple, obviously, if you start thinking on those, you're like, whoa, and I got to think about some stuff. Mm-hmm. But so encouragement or advice from me, I really like, so part of my marriage prep too, I started going to That Man Is You, that program, the men's weekly program that really helps point out a lot of statistics for broken families, drug use, alcohol, pornography, all that stuff. It's really awesome, and it brings in the wisdom of the saints and the church teaching and all that stuff. It's fantastic if anybody's needing a boost there. But one of the things that the founder, Steve Bowman, frequently talks about is he says that wherever you are in your journey, in your spiritual journey, God wants to encounter you there and now. And it doesn't mean only when you're perfect. It does mean when you're perfect. It doesn't mean only when you're at your lowest, but he will meet you there too. But he wants to meet you now. And so I just wrote some examples because I thought it would be interesting not only for just to say it, but also like, okay, so in about the year 30, Jesus encountered Simon through Andrew.
It's true.
And he was a fisherman in Galilee, and he was doing pretty well. I think he had multiple boats running, and he was a commercial, fisherman on the sea. And Jesus encountered him, and when he did, Simon told him, he was the first one to confess, you are the Messiah that we've all been waiting for. So obviously he becomes the Petra, the Peter, on which the church is established. Jesus encountered Zacchaeus shortly after there. He was this kind of short guy, he was a Jew, but he was a tax collector for the Roman Empire there, and everybody hated the guy. He was a short guy in a tree trying to see Jesus, and Jesus said, hey, get down here, I'm coming to your house. And it basically saying, like, I'm coming into your life now. And so what did he do? He paid off all his debts. If he robbed anyone, he paid him back, gave away half his stuff after that, and followed Christ. He encountered Saul in 35, let's say, I guess, resurrected. Literally knocked him off his horse, and was like, hey dude, you're persecuting me. And obviously, and Saul was just going from killing these Christians over here to killing those Christians over there. And he knocked him off his horse and was like, yo, cut it out, man. And you're killing me. And me, meaning my church, my members here. And so Saul becomes Paul, evangelizes the known world. Constantine, 4th century, or 3rd century, 4th century, Battle of Milvian Bridge. God says, look, put this sign, this Cairo, it's all over our stuff, put this Cairo on your shield, go into battle, you're going to win. He did. Makes it legal to live and be Christian, which is, at that point, it was unprecedented because you were killed if you were a Christian. Augustine through Ambrose, because he encounters you through different people too. It's not always through the same means of just finding him in prayer or whatever, but it's through other people too. And Augustine I relate to a lot because he had a stage 2. He had a hell of a stage 2, and then he came back and came into the communion with the church. And he has become one of the most prolific church fathers. He basically invented the autobiography. This is the first one of any kind. And Thomas Aquinas becomes the major influence on how the church reconciles reason with faith alone, and really along the lines of truth cannot contradict truth, so faith cannot contradict reason. And tons of all the saints, along the way: Ignatius of Loyola, Dominic, Francis of Assisi, Rose of Lima, Vincent de Paul, all your favorite saints, right? And they've all had that encounter with Christ, and they haven't always been perfect, and they haven't always been at their lowest either. Mm-hmm. So, the biggest, and I'll finish with, or my last thought on this one is that he has encountered me at my lowest and at my highest, and continues to every day. And I just, continue to pray that I'm an instrument of his will, and that he will see fit that I will join him for eternity after this life. And so he wants to encounter you now. That's basically it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Praise God for you and for the gift that you are to us, and the way that Christ works through you. You couldn't have given me a better intro to our conclusion here. So our conclusion here is another test for Arrow's numbers, but some of the guys on the team have answered the question, how do you see Jesus in Blake? And it's so funny because you talked about, when I asked you the question, where did you see Jesus in stage 2, those teenage rebel years?
Yeah.
You said that it was hard work and fraternity, that you're not doing. He's going to use it for something else later in your life, and I think you'll see the themes of hard work and fraternity shine through in some of these responses. So, arrow number 36. I think it would have to be in his team first mentality, in the I did not come to be served but to serve mindset. He's one of the more experienced players in our club, but always takes the time to have patience and a certain gentleness in explaining or teaching the game to the less experienced in the club. I can imagine Jesus having frequent discussions with Peter where he gently corrects rather than saying, "Dude, did you not hear what I said?" The dude might give away who that one was after Brett's comment earlier. Anyways, my card, I think, left you that.
That's my, okay.
Yeah, so
awesome.
Arrow number 51. I see Jesus in Blake as a man who loves you regardless, while also encouraging, even politely demanding you to be and do better, inherently giving of himself unto others, showing and expecting of you to do the same and find enjoyment in the same. Brett Owens.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
This one's great. His humility and service to others. His help healing me. I've had multiple injuries Blake provided guidance on. Telling me to look for the space. Grace could be space. His willingness to sacrifice for the greater good of others. His spiritual and physical discipline. Bullet points true to the author as well as the wink face. Thank you, Mike Muma.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
And lastly, arrow number 9. The man sitting across from you. I'm amazed by your humility. I've had the joy of listening to some other podcasts that you've been featured on, and you mentioned pride as something that was really something you struggled with early on, and the remedy to pride is humility. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's so cool to see the way the Lord uses you as such a humble tool now. Not necessarily knowing your prideful past, but like that humility is what shines forth through you now, which is the complete antidote to pride. So,
that's very kind.
Cheers. So, with that, we will conclude the formal part. I know we are about 8 minutes over. So, thank you guys for joining them tonight.
Thanks, guys.
Just a quick plug. So, we have 3 other Arrows Tales this semester. We will feature Richard Bagel, Adam Smythe, and Mike Hart in those. We'll also have different interviewers for each one, so you get a little bit of a change of style and cadence and all. So hope you can join for the rest of them.